The NFL is the target of yet another concussion lawsuit, and this one's coming from a really big name, star quarterback Dan Marino. He filed a federal suit with 14 other former players in Philadelphia last week, claiming that the NFL knew all about the dangers of concussions, but denied it, concealed it, and didn't take the steps to protect its players. The NFL said today that it is not commenting on the lawsuit. That's not unusual, but it all comes on the heels of a lawsuit filed last month by a group of former players saying that the league gave them painkillers illegally. And then if it all sounds very familiar, you may remember that it comes under the shadow of a huge class action concussion lawsuit that even now is still tied up in the courts. Because earlier this year, a judge effectively set aside a proposed settlement, refused to put the stamp on it, for the NFL to pay $760 million to thousands of people who either were directly affected by the concussions or those down the line of lineage of the players who might have been affected. That judge said, "I'm sorry, but that's just not enough money to cover all the people and all the damage." I'm joined now by attorney Brian Kabateck in Los Angeles, who's handled more than 100 class action lawsuits. He's also the current president of the Consumer Attorneys of California. Brian, thanks so much for being with me. My first question to you is this. If the other lawsuits, some 4,500 people, I think, were covered in that lawsuit, or at least not covered, but were named in that lawsuit, if that is a class action lawsuit, well, ultimately, wouldn't you think Dan Marino would be covered by it? Because anybody in the NFL affected could have joined that class action. Why does he need to do this?
Absolutely, Dan Marino would be part of that class, but I think Dan Marino is a marquee plaintiff, a marquee class representative, and I believe he's probably trying to send a message that this matters, this is important to the players, this is important to former players, current players, and he is certainly the kind of class representative you would want to get out in front of this and to tell the NFL and to tell the teams, you've got to make a decision. You've got to come to some sort of resolution of this case.
But what about all of the different arbitration agreements that many of these players may have entered into? Doesn't that really muck things up in terms of getting a nice, clean group of people with a good, clean settlement, if they're going to get it at all?
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. There are three major hurdles that the plaintiff lawyers in this case have to overcome. The arbitration agreement, and arbitration right now, according to the United States Supreme Court, is sacrosanct. It is absolute. Number two, these are employees. I don't care how you look at it, they're employees of teams, meaning workers' compensation is supposed to be the exclusive remedy. And finally, number three, federal preemption. There's a collective bargaining agreement. Federal law may mean that they have no standing. That's why this is a very difficult lawsuit, despite the fact that the injuries are horrific.
Yeah, Brian, can the NFL, I mean, I'm just looking at the former settlement in the $700 million range and now this. Can the NFL, I know it's huge, I know it has a lot of money, can it weather this? I mean, is there a possibility that there might not be an NFL, or certainly not one we recognize in the future?
Well, it's a very good question. The smaller teams, the smaller markets could be in desperate trouble as a result of this. There could be bankruptcies that follow. The NFL itself, which is nothing more than a collection of teams, could be in real trouble if this goes into the multi-billion-dollar range. You know, the lawyers that are working on this case for the plaintiffs are the same lawyers that got $4 billion for Vioxx a few years ago. These are not lightweights. They're going hard.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think you and I will have another conversation soon about this one. Thank you, Brian. Nice to see you.
Please do.
Brian Kabateck live for us on that issue. And now another big issue.